Welcome back to the Libertarian Christian Roundtable, where we assess and discuss the news from a libertarian Christian perspective. It is the last weekend in January 2021. We have survived an entire month of this year, and it so far looks a little better than last year. I don't know. We'll see. And what's really pressing news here is how much we have come together as a society. Especially on social media, especially on the internet. If it weren't for the internet, this phenomenon would not be possible. And that is how Bernie Sanders brought us together with his mask and his mittens. As you can see, in our backgrounds are in honorarium or an homage to the great Bernie Sanders for doing in just a few weeks. Joe Biden was like, hey, man, don't steal my thunder here. I was supposed to bring unity to the people. And so everybody's just like in love with Bernie memes. So this has been a great phenomenon. It's like it almost reminds me of back in March of 2020 when we were all like, oh my goodness, what's going on with this pandemic and all the shutdowns? And yet there were just amazing memes over. I mean, it was just like this was what I lived on through the second half of March 2020. Don't tell my wife, guys. So anyway, so the unity thing is really, really important, especially in the new administration, because now all the people who the left just looks down upon and disdains, we're going to be unified now. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
One big happy family.
One big happy family.
But it does raise a lot of questions, though, because when in the inauguration speech, when Biden is speaking of unity and things such as that, and not defining them, well, that does sort of like, okay, well, what do you mean by unity? What's that going to take?
Yeah, right,
right. Which people need to be unified anyway?
Right.
I mean, which ones aren't? So the lack, and this is characteristic of so much of pablum, inauguration speeches or political speeches in general, right? Is that they're all milquetoast vagaries of nothingness until you actually get down to the dirty details and somebody's getting their teeth kicked in.
Yeah.
So that's what's really concerning about it all on some level. Whereas at least with memes, it's like we're all having fun together.
Yeah.
We saw something cool, we thought it was funny, and even a libertarian can get a kick out of Bernie Sanders and mittens. So come on, guys. Like, anyway, that's maybe a little bit of a slight aside, but
yeah, no. Well, hey, and I want to just welcome Prax from the Gamertarians. I don't know if it's a podcast or a channel. I can't. The name is drawing a blank. But you're from the Gamertarians, and right. Prax, you are a dear friend of Norman and me, and you've helped LCI in a number of ways. And we are so glad to have you on. I just want to get your take. Like, what is your sort of first instinct when you hear people talk about, oh, we now need to come together and have unity?
I mean, what's the point of being unified? We don't have any principles. I mean, it's one of those things where
winning is the principle. That's the goal, right? We win, you lose.
Right. When I hear the term principles coming from the left, I just hear is the word submission. And it's one of those things where when I look at what's happened with the Bernie meme, and I know we're going to talk about the Reddit phenomenon later with GameStop. It's these things that bring all of these disagreeing parties together to say this is good. When you see Bernie, who the right's going off, the right wingers going crazy about election was stolen. Well, who's had a few elections stolen from him? Bernie Sanders. So here's a guy who rightfully sits arms crossed, mittens on. I'm just trying to keep my sanity and stay warm when the world around me is trying to derail my agenda, which, right, wrong, or indifferent, this guy believes in his agenda, and the establishment has come hard on saying, you will not be our guy. And then for seeing those same Bernie bros get on board with like, what, you guys want to use market forces to bring down hedge funds? do it. We're on board. This is awesome. So like
the market brings people together. Sure does, right?
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing,
that.
right? Is that you don't have to be unified on all your principles, like the varying principles that one could hold in order to interact peaceably together in society. We have a market for that.
Yeah.
And that's what's, and so really it's those who want to bring that down who have the utmost of interest in disunification of anything.
Right. It's the dynamic complexity of our ideas, which is actually wonderful about humanity. And we don't want to just, all be thinking and doing the same exact thing.
Yeah.
That's boring.
Dynamic complexity. I love those words.
Yes,
what I've often seen in the left is that they don't want a diversity of ideas. They want their ideas from a diversity of mouths.
Well, and I had posted this question on my Facebook page to, genuinely to my own followers who did vote for Biden, who want that unity. I was like, okay, tell me what he means by unity. And one of the commenters said, well, this means we can finally come together on COVID. And I thought,
really?
Really?
What does that mean? And, the implication being, well, the only reason why we had any division on COVID was because of Trump. And I'm just like, how much credit do you actually want to give Trump? This is like the devil made me do it argument.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah. So, at any rate, sure, we could have unity, but we have to, like Prax said, unity on what? We need some principles. There doesn't seem to be any principles behind it, except your ideas are not my ideas, and therefore you need to go to a re-education camp.
Yeah.
But let's just take the memes that are in the backgrounds of all of our heads.
Carrie's becoming unified with the polar bear behind her thanks to her Zoom technology.
That's right. So I'm melding into it.
Well, like what does the Bernie meme even mean? I mean, it's a guy who's had probably 2 elections stolen from him because he has the wrong ideas, sitting there as a part of the pomp and circumstance that he's got to be there by, there's no way he can't be there. He has to be there, sit there with his arms crossed in the cold with his I'm not cool, I don't know what cool means, mittens on. And look at him ensconced in all of these pictures behind us. One is man touching God. One is a guy sitting on an iron beam that represents the revolution of industry in America. The other is a guy sitting on America going to the moon. The other is a guy getting eaten by, I don't know, the perils of global warming. I mean, what it means is like
Al Gore's pet.
In all of these great human moments, in all of these great American undertakings and accomplishment, is a guy who's like, this is BS. Yeah. This is BS. Yeah. All of this is BS. And I know it. And I'm sitting here and I know it, but I have an idea of what is right. And I think we as libertarian Christians often have to sit on the sidelines and say, I have an idea of what is right. And I just have to endure this madness. How do I make a difference in spite of that?
Well, and it's the one thing he has in common with Ron Paul, right? Because Ron Paul got screwed over by his party twice and went through the pomp and circumstance and represented anti-establishment voters and people who wanted change and something different, and understood that the system is jacked up and rigged. And so at any rate, I think that is definitely a unifying theme, because we all get it, whether we're on the right or the left or libertarian or what. If you get that the system's rigged and we need something that goes against the establishment, then that's a unifying principle we can get behind.
100%.
Yeah, so this is a great transition into let's go against the establishment.
Yes.
Second topic, the Reddit trend that became Robinhood being oddly against its own principled name. Yeah. Anyway, I think Norman is the person I think to like maybe give us a little sense here. I don't know. Like I don't have the mind to like understand how these financial games are played.
Yeah, like explain it to us like we're 5.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that. You've got young kids. You've already told them, I'm sure, what happened. And they were like, oh, Dad, I understand it now.
Yeah. Don't I wish?
Yeah.
Or explain it to me like I've already lost $5,000 on the wrong side of this trade.
Well, I hope you haven't.
Oh, I can do that for you, Eric. GameStop never trades at a reasonable price.
I'm just kidding.
Wow. All right. Well, yeah. So we're alluding to the absolutely mind-boggling phenomenon of the GameStop stock. And so there's a number of things you kind of have to know to sort of understand that both the background of why this is happening, as well as the mechanics of what's going on and why the pricing is. So everybody knows that basically that the price of GameStop stock is just wildly varying, and it's trading perhaps way over what is one would expect for such a company in today's day and age, which, you know, GameStop is historically has been like a mall-based retailer, although they have plenty of, you know, strip mall locations as well. And what do? Well, they sell video games mostly, and they, you know, a lot of more of like gear and both the hardware and software for gaming, as well as just you know, fan type memorabilia,
Super Mario keychains.
Yeah, I mean, all that sort of stuff. So you know what that is, and you know, and the result of COVID has been so many retailers have been hit, and they were particularly hit. But what's interesting is that over the course of the last 6 months of 2020, there were a lot of changes that happened in GameStop. They got a big, high-powered new investor who put like 7% into the company, basically bought like a 7% share, and then ended up investing more, and then he owned about 13% or something to that effect, and got himself 2 board seats on GameStop, and in fact, like they had, a lot of people don't know this, they ended up doing over the course of December like 330% increase on year-over-year sales. So this is not a company that was down and out of the market, period. Okay. Mm-hmm. But what began to be and actually, so then that corresponds, by the way, with a number of people who started going long on GameStop stock well over a year ago. And those are people in a little lesser known Reddit forum called Wall Street Bets. And then the unthinkable happened. What happened in December and in early January is that it began to be noticed that that there were some particular hedge funds that were shorting GameStop stock so much that that what's called the float went well over 100%, and that up to upwards of 140 to 150% nearly. Now the float, it's kind of hard to understand. And so we'll have to, first of all, before we get to that, we'll say, what does it mean to short a stock? Okay, so here I'm going to have to tell you this like you're 5. Now, normally when you buy a stock and you're going to hold it, you're hoping that it's going to go up, or you're holding it so that if they give you a dividend, you'll get some residual off of that. And so you want that price to increase over time, because that is an increase in value. And it's somewhat reflective. You're owning a piece of the company at that point. You are an owner in GameStop or IBM or whatever. Okay. Now, shorting the stock is kind of the opposite. Okay. Shorting is where you are betting on, in a sense, betting on the price of the stock going down. And the way this has to work then is you have to borrow the share with the commitment that you're going to sell it back at a future date at the strike price of whatever it is at that point in time. So if the price goes down, then you make money. But if the price keeps going up, then you actually lose money. And because you're borrowing the shares in order to do this, essentially, you end up also paying an interest fee on it. And this is where you get this idea of margin calls. So you're borrowing on a margin, and if the price increases too much, you can get your margin called. And this happens in commodities as well. If you've ever been dealing in gold or silver margin trading, you can encounter that as well. So here's what's really kind of crazy about it, though. When a hedge fund goes and borrows the shares, they can then in turn lend them to someone else. And so essentially it's been borrowed twice, and that's how the float is calculated. And essentially, and so it's basically like how many shares are outstanding at the end of the day with respect to, borrowed versus real shares. Okay. That's where it's, so when you get above 100%, something's going funny. Now, Reddit noticed this. Wall Street Bets noticed this. And they basically said, we are going to call you on this. Because when hedge funds do this, they're basically just trying to drive the price down into the ground. They are saying, we're going to make money on this company going bankrupt, and we're going to do all we can to just trash it. And we've seen this happen before. This has happened in the past. This happened in 2008. Okay. When, even, and businesses have gone down because of people who just said, like, nope, we're not going to let this company exist. And so it's interesting that there's, in the United States, at least, what's called naked shorting is illegal, where that's where you're essentially, you're shorting a stock without actually borrowing the shares that you're shorting. It's a really weird phenomenon, and just Google it and you'll figure it out. But it's actually illegal. But the loophole that's kind of around that is this lending the shares that you just borrowed deal. And it's all, I hesitate. It's not naked shorting, but it's close. Okay. And so when you get this humongous number of shorted shares, that puts you into this very interesting situation where if the price starts going up, margins start getting called. And if margins start getting called, then they got to start buying back the shares. If they're buying back the shares, that's going to increase the demand for the shares. The demand for the shares goes up, the price goes up. And guess what? Now the cycle starts again. And now you could essentially see price go up, margins called. And every day, of course, they're paying interest on these shares too. And so this is what, when you get into this scenario, this is what you call the short squeeze. Okay. This is where it gets awesome, because suddenly now do you have a whole lot of Redditors who are holding these shares and saying, we are not going to sell. You are going to pay, like, you do not get to just to burn this company down. Instead, we're going to burn you down because you are the ones carrying the risk. Because here's the trick. While if you own the stock, your maximum risk is what you put into it. In other words, if I buy stock in, Prax Inc. for $100, my max loss is $100. But if I short Prax Inc. stock, what's my loss level potential? It's actually infinite, because there is no limit to what the stock can increase. It can only decrease to zero, right? It can increase wherever. And I'm paying interest. So this is bleeding the hedge funds dry, and it's freaking beautiful. These are evil sons of a guns at times, and I'm just loving the fact that they're just getting burned.
So I have a genuine question, because I've seen a couple of articles from libertarian guys who are saying, oh, this concept of shorting stock and all of that isn't actually a bad thing.
Correct.
And
that is correct.
Okay. So you can speak to that point first, but also I want to talk more about the fact that if this were a free market that was completely unregulated, like one of the problems with the Redditors that, made a profit from doing what they did, from the, what's it called? The short squeeze, is that Robinhood then, cut off their ability to actually trade, make bank on that. And so how would this actually work in a situation that's unregulated, where you don't have these rules that Robinhood, Robinhood would have to go like put the kibosh on that?
Well, okay. So there's three questions that you basically just asked. Okay. Number one is essentially the short selling like legit? Is that going to happen on a free market? The answer is yes. Short selling is actually a way of providing liquidity into markets. And that's not a problem. There's nothing that can stop people making this type of deal per se. And technically speaking, there is not a legit reason why you have to totally prevent even the secondary effect of people lending borrowed shares. However, when you over leverage yourself, like the way that they have, that opens you up to losing the game. Okay. All of these sorts of momentum type trades are susceptible to essentially disruptions in the momentum. So even if it's not being traded on the basis of fundamentals of, say, the business balance sheet, which is what some people, what even the hedge funders are like, oh, they're not, the stock price is not reflecting the fundamentals of actual GameStop balance sheet. It's like, that doesn't frickin' matter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is absolutely a fundamentals based equation. It just happens to be not the fundamentals you like to be talking about right now.
Yeah.
It's the fundamentals of what the game you've been trying to play, Mr. Hedge Funder, which is a difference in market momentum and hype.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So these things are all totally legitimate on the free market. The hedge funders are just mad because they're losing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that the hedge funders, I mean, isn't also part of the problem that the hedge funders have made a huge, their own profits by gaming the system and sort of, through various regulations. So they haven't even played fair this whole time.
Yeah, they have the backing of the Fed and certain other ways, that things that retail investors just simply never have had access to. So they're kind of playing in a weighted system already. So again, the fact that they're losing at their own game pisses them off. And that's why this is to be celebrated, left and right.
So
these,
so in a free market, the guys on
gamers
on Reddit, in a free market where the guys on Reddit are able to figure out this short squeeze, that's sort of like a consumer regulation, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. This is calling them on their own irresponsible betting game, essentially, and that's what's great about it.
Yeah.
Now,
Go ahead.
Let me kind of address the other two questions. We sort of answered the third one. The second one is, what did Robinhood do? And there's still some question about it. It looked really, really, really suspicious on Wednesday and Thursday as things were happening. But one thing to kind of remember is that Robinhood is technically not the full clearinghouse. Right. So their issue was that part of their issue could have been that they couldn't really provide full liquidity in order to actually they needed more time essentially in order to get the fronted cash in order to help to actually pay off the liquidated position. Right. Okay. So they can't, it's a cash flow problem. Mm-hmm. And because they're not a bank, they're not technically like a broker. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's what's kind of odd about them. They're a tech company that is operating with the broker in the background, which is Citadel. Okay. Got it. So that's where it gets really weird. And now I'm not trying to let them off the hook, because the way that they did it was pretty bad. Now here's the other thing though. I kind of need to correct what you said there.
Sure.
People were not in a position where they could always sell. Okay? Yeah. What they were having a problem with is that the Redditors wanted to buy more. Okay. Uh-huh. So the worst of it was that when people were under the impression that, oh my gosh, something is going wrong with the plan or whatever. And so then they started liquidating too early, not realizing what they were doing, because oh my gosh, there's no reason to liquidate, guys.
Yeah. Right.
There was no problem with where they were right at that moment. And it was just fluctuation in momentum. And it's like, okay, fine, whatever. As they like to say, diamond hands, don't be paper hands.
Okay.
It's a little joke, apparently, that they use. Yeah. But and so we've now I think we kind of answered all your questions, though. Okay. What you were referring to there is that and it is complicated. There were accusations of total market manipulation on their part, and they're not necessarily wrong. It could have still happened. Sure. But there's also a little bit of a jumping the gun potentially. Mm-hmm. Which pieces are secondary effects and which are primary effects. It's kind of hard to piece out. But there is going to be a lawsuit against Robinhood, and they definitely lost a lot of goodwill through this. Mm-hmm. They should have done better. They should have been they try to talk about democratizing finance and being transparent and all that. They really failed on this one. Yeah. So no matter what, they're going to get their butts handed to them after this. I'm leaving Robinhood after this. So as fast as I can. So, whatever.
So as a Gamertarian here, I love this story, man. This is so great. This is great. On so many levels. So you've got the disruptor, Robinhood, coming in, and we see this trend all throughout big tech. These disruptors come in, and all of a sudden they're part of the old guard. They're part of the establishment. like that, and I think they quickly forget how quickly they disrupted and how quickly they can be disrupted. So what they did throughout this situation is they just signaled 100% that they're in the tank for Wall Street. And the meme lords on Reddit have done more for market regulation through this process than the SEC has done in its entire existence. Okay.
Wow.
Like it's incredible to see what happened. And, I visualize all these, these guys that are working at Domino's, kind of like failure to launch guys who live in their parents' basement, who have like a little nest egg saved up. And they're like, you know what? Screw this. I saw 2008. I saw what happened. I saw how they socialized the losses and privatized the profits. And I see a chance here to pounce. And a lot of them pounced on it. And I hope they all become millionaires, trillionaires, billionaires, trillionaires. I couldn't hope for more, because like, I don't know everything. Like, I'm not wealthy enough to make this claim, but like,
we are not offering any financial advice tonight,
yeah.
Like my father,
we just like the stock.
My father actually helped open the euro dollar options trading pit in the 80s in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange.
Ooh. So that's swanky.
I should know by my blood what options are. I don't. I'm not wealthy enough to know. He's explained to me a million times. I still don't understand it. But
we'll talk.
But now that I'm a libertarian through and through, what do libertarians say is always the answer to just about every human problem?
The market.
More freedom.
Insurance in the market. Right?
Yes.
Insurance is going to solve all our problems, right? Options are insurance.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
in a manner of speaking, sure.
Okay,
is that a good metaphor?
So if you want to minimize your losses on a position, you can purchase an option.
Yeah,
right.
And it restricts your top level gain, and it restricts your
right. There's all kinds of like combinations you can buy, an iron condor, like all these things that like. No, I'm serious. Like
credit and debit spreads.
No, that's what it is. Like there's a limit. You can only lose so much, and you can only gain so much. And the game these jokers were playing was kind of like, come on, these guys are in a mall. Everyone's buying their games online now. These guys are destined for extinction. And all the kids that grew up trading in their PS1 and PS2 games for 50 cents and $1 for what they paid $30 for are like, you know what? Screw you guys.
Yep.
We're gonna run this thing to the moon, and you guys can eat crow. And I love that, because it really is using existing market vehicles of managing risk and creating profit that they used to say, you guys were overextended. It's time to pay the piper. And all the whining and crybaby attitude that's come out of that, and how obviously the corporate press has come out and said,
tears of
oh my goodness, just chugging it. It's just like, come on, give me a break. You guys make gravy every day of the week, every year. And the one time you guys get called on it, you're like, oh, help me state, help me government. You're my only hope. And it's like, give me a break.
Yeah.
Well, and I really want to hit home the fact that this, this is a form of consumer regulation. We do talk about the fact that the market can solve problems, and it can solve it more effectively, more efficiently than the state can. And you don't wind up with this thing where the rich are just running everybody else's lives. Like we can actually regulate it ourselves.
What Robinhood did, and every other exchange that shut down normal transaction, they were making a calculation, an economic calculation, which was, we would rather pay an SEC fine than get taken to the cleaners more than we are right now in the free market.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see, that just that level of calculation being played out in real time. Because there are things like, there are real things that, like the New York Stock Exchange in times of extreme volatility will shut down. They'll tell everybody to cool off for a couple minutes. That is part of the rules, of trading on the stock exchange. Okay. You expect that. And it's also not unheard of to have brokerages, get into liquidity problems, which might lead to not being able to trade on certain stocks. So it was it's hard. I'm not necessarily trying to defend those behaviors per se, because surely there's got to be better ways of doing this, or there's got to be more transparent ways of doing it at least. And the other thing is, by the way, just again, I'll note that that they couldn't lose anything if they didn't sell, and it wasn't that they were the worst aspect that we saw was there were a few positions that ended up getting that, like Robinhood just said, oh, we're closing out your position. I don't know. I do not understand why that is and how that got played into it. I don't understand that at all. That's the most suspicious part. But the fact is, it didn't happen to everybody. So why did it only happen to some? I don't understand the full game behind that. That's what's really, really suspicious here, and things that we definitely need to be watching out for in many respects. But again, otherwise, it's just like, no one was at any risk when you just couldn't buy per se, because as long as you weren't selling, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
Okay. So I think it's a little, it's just a little oddish right now, but it is what it is.
So something that's probably more awkward than my transition there from what we're going to talk about, what we just talked about, to what we're going to talk about, is the timing of the reopening of California and several other states. Just seems a little coincidental. It's almost like the inauguration of Joe Biden was like a vaccine for the country or something.
It's magical.
It was like this, it was the solution that brought us together.
Yeah, I mean, suddenly Andrew Cuomo was worried about the economy, and suddenly
and jobs. Oh gosh!
Suddenly, things in California just made Gavin Newsom be like, "Hey, we can open." And
he got his Emmy. He was ready to move on.
Yeah, I guess so. It's really interesting, and I think there was a lot of speculation before the election that COVID was going to go away after the election. And of course it didn't. And so it carried on, and we were like, oh, maybe this was, well, I shouldn't say we, there were people out there who were like, oh, this was a conspiracy theory. It was a QAnon conspiracy theory. And then all of a sudden Biden gets inaugurated, and you've got these Democrats doing hard flips to get their states back open. In New Mexico, we were going to be in the red and not able to reopen until close to next fall. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, New Mexico, you guys are doing great with your cases. We're going to reopen our schools. So I think I think it would be very beneficial for even those people who take COVID seriously and didn't trust Trump with what he was doing, to really look at the politics of this and see that there's some significant inconsistencies here.
It's pretty lame. You also like, speaking of the politics there, the potential recall of Governor Newsom from California undoubtedly played into that decision. It's so transparently obvious. It's like, what else could it be?
Mm-hmm.
And unbelievable the way that that's played out.
Yeah.
Similarly, it seems like Cuomo is kind of, he's not in the threat of recall, but maybe in the threat of, I don't know, overthrow. He's going to be up for re-election at some point.
Yeah. Well, you have a mass exodus from California, mass exodus from New York. Yeah. And so
he sees capital leaving, basically.
Yeah. Capital is leaving. Tax revenue is leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The irony is there's a lot of New Yorkers coming to my part of the country, which is Pennsylvania. And I know this because I know some real estate agents, and they're like, yeah, a bunch of people from New York are coming in and like buying property.
We got a ton of California people coming into our state too.
Yeah. You know, I think this would be a good topic, I think, to wrap up on it, just even in brief, because what we're pointing out, I think, is okay, maybe there's a coincidental timing, but that, you know, we shouldn't just sort of accept events and the news as is, and that we should always have a critical mind as to the timing, the connection between certain things. Now, you can connect things too many times and be like, oh my goodness, you know, and have remember the crazy meme with the guy,
yes,
up against the wall with like everything drawn together. But like, you know, the Newsom's recall, lots of people leaving New York. Those things aren't unrelated to some of these decisions. These decisions aren't made in a vacuum. The governors make. And so, you know, as libertarians, as Christians, we assess the news, we look at things, we try to be critical. We, you know, obviously there's so much you can read out there, but in terms of an analysis, it's just like always have that sort of like suspicion that something more is going on. And when you can find some fairly simple, you know, connections, it's like, oh, well, no kidding. And honestly, I've found that to be a helpful way in explaining to people who don't quite understand what libertarianism, you know, thinks about certain politics. It's like, look, this is a connection between this person who's making certain kinds of decisions and their incentives and the context in which they try to make those decisions. You know, a lot of people really still think of these politicians as like, I don't want to say gods, but like unbiased, like
demigods.
Sort of demigods, sort of like Sheldon Cooper type people, where it's like, oh, they're just completely irrational and that's it, right?
But this is also where we can also remember Hanlon's razor.
Yes.
Okay.
I was forgetting the name, and I knew you were going to bring it up, so I just was going to let you.
There you go. So yeah, I mean, an explanation that it's often better to explain these sorts of things as the result of stupidity or incompetence rather than malevolence.
Yes,
right.
And I think that's really perhaps the like an overarching theme throughout all of this. It's like these people who purport to be, oh, we're good managers. Oh, we're really good at this.
Yeah,
we can help you. They're dumber than a bunch of bricks.
Yeah.
And they don't know thing one about how to do any of this. And whether we're talking about Trump or Gavin Newsom or the governor of New Mexico, Pennsylvania, or Governor Cuomo, they are all idiots. Okay. They do not have,
or if you want to be more charitable, they're
coordinate
ignorant.
This sort of stuff.
Yeah. If you want to be more charitable than Norman, they're just ignorant and they don't have the ability to do what we sort of attribute to them with malice.
No need to be charitable to politicians.
All right.
But Doug,
I understand. I'm just, you know.
But Doug, Michelle Lujan Grisham, this is her passion. Is public health.
Yeah.
It's her passion.
Oh, it's her passion. Your health is her passion.
That's right.
Oh,
yeah.
Right. She loves your health more than you do, apparently, right?
Really makes me feel good.
Unless turquoise jewelry is on the line.
Oh, well, we'll just have to leave that hanging.
This lighter here is just burn. Oh my gosh.
Man.
All right. Well, everybody, I appreciate you joining us for the Libertarian Christian Roundtable. Thank you, Prax, for joining us. Yeah.
Doug.
Yeah.
Can I end with some scripture?
Oh, yeah, sure.
All right. This is Galatians 4. I mean that the heir, as long as he is a child, is no different from a slave, though he is the owner of everything, but he is under guardians and managers until the date set by his father. In the same way, we also, when we were children, were enslaved to the elementary principles of the world. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son, born of woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. And because you are sons, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then an heir through God. So I would exhort our listeners to not be slaves to the elementary principles of this world, but rather sons and daughters of God and the inheritance of that thinking.
Excellent.
No better way to end. Thanks, Prax.
Go check them out at twitch.tv/Gamertarians.
See you next time, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.